How's it going, everyone? I am Jinsula. I hope you're having a good day, and welcome to today's Pokemon Go video. Alright, we really need to talk about the Global Hoenn Tour Event. A lot of players were extremely frustrated and overall disappointed with it. I really think Niantic made a huge misstep this past weekend, and a lot of lessons need to be learned. I'm going to be talking about all of this in today's video, so let's roll the intro and get right into it. Okay, first of all, I have to say that I actually didn't mind the Global Hoenn Tour Event. The reason for that is because my expectations were really low to begin with. Since I attended the Las Vegas Go Tour event, I treated the global event as more of a supplemental event. I wasn't planning to go hard on the shiny hunt, and my only interests were in primal raids. That pretty much sums up the event. For most, it was basically a glorified raid day, only you didn't get the bonus raid passes or anything like that. Here's where the community was extremely disappointed. If the primal raids were introduced in its own event, I think nobody would have complained. But the fact that Niantic used primal raids as the only notable feature of an established big event is what drew a lot of player criticism. I really think Niantic needs to take a step back and try to see what players actually want. When it comes to the Go Tour events of the past 2 years, what made them so popular was the fact that they introduced new shinies and they culminated in getting a shiny mythical. This year's Go Tour strayed really far away from that, focusing more on raids. Even when it came to the raiding, there were a lot of different issues and unnecessary difficulties that only exacerbated player frustrations. For one, Niantic decided to give players the least amount of Premier Balls as possible for primal raid encounters. This meant that if you were to defeat these raids, you had a high chance of not even catching it. At least in my local communities, this was a huge point of frustration that frequently came up. On average, I would get maybe 8 to 10 balls per encounter. This was immensely annoying because I really wanted to stock up on Candy XL for both Kyogre and Groudon during this event. My overall catch rate for both of them was around 80%. Since I maxed out on Primal Energy pretty quickly, I felt like I lost a lot of raid passes for nothing. I mean, it wasn't like the rewards outside of the encounters were anything substantial. Primal raids didn't give any rare Candy XL, even if you were to do them in person, and they barely gave you enough golden raspberries. At the start of the Global Hoenn Tour event, I had roughly 100 golden raspberries. By the end of it, I had maybe 8 or 9 left over. Considering how difficult primal raids were, and how they were a highlighted feature of this event, you would think that Niantic would add a bunch of rewards outside of primal energy and the encounters themselves. Like, I'm seriously disappointed that they were so stingy. They really didn't have a good reason to be, and all they did was create a lot of negative sentiments behind one of their landmark events. Something I observed was a lot of players feeling very deflated by around halfway through each day. I think Niantic needs to recognize that raiding-centric events can be very taxing on a player in many ways. For one, there are a lot of different pressures that players will face, whether it be managing raid passes and items, catching the Pokemon itself, maybe they run into a perfect IV and must absolutely catch it, or the most common point of pressure, finding enough people to complete a raid. You also have to take into consideration that an event like this is going to be seen as a massive cash grab. I was talking to a fellow player at a raid, and he brought up a good point. Even though the Global Hoenn Tour event was free, most players probably ended up spending more than they would have on raid passes. The problem is that the return on the investment just didn't feel as good. My point is that they shouldn't have put such a strong emphasis on raiding, or at least, they should have added bonuses or benefits that would have added a ton of value to the event and made the gameplay not as frustrating. I think they did this really well last year with the Ultra Beast Arrival event. For every Ultra Beast encounter, they gave you Beast Balls instead of Premier Balls. These balls gave you a guaranteed catch. That took away a lot of roadblocks for newer players to get these Pokemon. It was a positive experience all around. Whereas for this Global Hoenn Tour event, there were just a lot of reasons to complain, and most players were pretty burnt out early on. I think the simplest solution to all of this would have been to make the catching process a lot easier. The raids were tuned a little hard, so I can understand players in low populated areas were having a difficult time completing them, but for what it's worth, I thought it was easy enough where you could have completed them with a coordinated group. The bigger issue was definitely the catching. I mentioned earlier the lack of Premier Balls and Golden Raspberries, but to give them the difficult 2% catch rate on top of that was incredibly frustrating. For newer players, catching a bunch of these was going to be near impossible. This is in stark contrast to last year's Go Tour event, which felt more accessible and a lot more beginner friendly. Whether you are a veteran player looking to get rare shinies, or a newer player trying to fill up the holes in your Pokédex, there was a lot of gameplay that was right for you. However, this year, the event felt very watered down, and aside from primal raids, there wasn't a whole lot to be excited about. There weren't any catch challenges aside from the very basic one for each habitat, the special research was incredibly uninteresting, and the version you picked had no significant impact on your gameplay. It just felt like they took everything that made the Go Tour events unique and exciting and replaced it with a lackluster shell. Finally, we got to talk about the shiny rate. I think a lot of players were incredibly frustrated that Niantic did not perma-boost the shiny odds for every single wild Pokemon like in previous Go Tour events. Some players were unaware that the shiny rate was nerfed to begin with. Thus, I did hear rumblings of players claiming they had terrible shiny luck. I think it wouldn't have been a problem if they had at least provided some kind of ticket purchase that would boost the shiny rate for anyone who buys them. Sure, that could be seen as a major cash grab, but I did talk to a lot of players who would have been willing to buy something like that. Look, for what it's worth, this was a pretty big misstep from Niantic. They had a major blunder in Las Vegas, and they needed the global event to do well in order to make up for that negativity. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like they achieved that. Now, I will say it wasn't all bad. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I actually enjoyed the global event for a couple of reasons. First off, I did set my expectations pretty low. Just based on what information we had, I wasn't expecting much from a gameplay point of view. Niantic did clearly state what the event was going to be like, so it's not like I was surprised by the format of the event. I think the only thing that took me by surprise was, of course, just how difficult it was to actually catch Groudon and Kyogre. But aside from that, I wouldn't consider the event as an absolute flop. It basically went as I thought it would. The other reason why I didn't mind the global event was because I also attended the Las Vegas event. Both of these events together formed an actually positive experience, even though each of them had their own set of issues. The global event was kind of like supplemental content to what I got with the Las Vegas event. Like, if I wanted a particular shiny, but was unable to get it in Las Vegas, then the global event was kind of like my second chance. That actually was the case, because one of the shinies that I really wanted from Las Vegas was Cacnea. Well, I was able to pick up several of them during the global event. Likewise, I was just short of maxing out on Primal Energy for both Groudon and Kyogre, and I felt like I wanted more Primal Raids in order to get more Candy and Candy XL for both of them. The global event was my chance to get more of those raids done. So basically, my point is, the global event had a lot of potential to be a positive event, but only if you had participated in the Las Vegas event, which I think was up to par or even exceeded previous Go Tour events from a content point of view. But of course, this is not going to apply to everyone. For all the players who were not able to go to Las Vegas, the global event by itself could be seen as lacking any of the good stuff that we got from past Go Tour events. If I were to make a suggestion to Niantic for future Go Tour events, I would say they should make sure the global event experience is up to par to any in-person experiences they create. You really shouldn't gimp the majority of players who don't attend your major in-person event. Equal efforts should be made so that everyone gets a phenomenal experience. Hopefully, Niantic can learn a few lessons from this event, and they can provide us with much better experiences moving forward. The next big thing we can look forward to is, of course, Pokémon Go Fest, and possibly some Safari Zones as well. I really do hope those events are a major step up from the Hoenn Go Tour event. But yeah, in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts about the Global Hoenn Tour event in the comments down below. Were you frustrated by some of the decisions Niantic made, or did you actually enjoy the event and think the backlash is overblown? Definitely tell me why, and let's have a great discussion. And if you ended up enjoying this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here, and don't forget that little bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And I want to give a quick shout out to my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support my channel in any way, big or small, then be sure to check out the links in the description below. For all my patrons, they get a permanent spot on my in-game friends list, so if you want to interact with me in some way, like with remote raids, then do consider becoming a patron on my Patreon. But yeah, that's going to be it. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you all later.